Anja is what we call a coach at large. So a few years ago, we began to get more and more requests about benevolence, and the benevolence requests that we received weren't the normal ones. They were churches that were having challenges because people were coming month after month, and maybe the diaconate was supporting them for a certain amount month after month, and sometimes for years even, that they were helping certain people, and they were not able to figure out ways to help them out. And so Anja Attema actually came to us once. She came to me once, gave me a call and said she wanted to chat. She was a financial advisor, and she had her own business as a financial advisor, and she had decided that she wanted to help more with people who didn't have a lot of money rather than people who do have a lot of money. And so she decided, that's a nice way to put it, right, Anja, to help people come out of poverty or out of some of the challenging financial situations that they were in. And so she was ideally situated in order to do that, because she is a financial advisor and has a lot of experience in that. So we hired her as what we call a coach at large. So she works right across Canada. She was very recently in Edmonton and in Calgary, does presentations like the one you're going to see today, but you can call her up and she will work one-on-one with your diaconate on challenging cases where there is somebody, and she'll talk about some stories right now where she is able to walk with you. She doesn't do the work for you, but as a diaconate, she'll walk with you and coach you as you help some of the more challenging places. This is a growing edge for Diaconal Ministries right now. In fact, we're talking with Anja about perhaps her coaching some coaches so that she can multiply herself, so that she doesn't have to travel all the way across Canada to help in some of these cases.
Thank you, Ron, for the introduction. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening and to give you a glimpse of what financial life coaching looks like. I think I'm going to just start with why I do what I do. And Ron touched on that a little bit, but I do what I do because financial advice is very valuable. And it is true that if you have money to invest, you basically have unlimited access to financial advice. However, those that struggle financially, they do not have access to financial advice. It's very, very limited. And so that is an inequality. And I just feel like I could level the playing field in my own circles. And so through diaconal coaches, I have that opportunity to work with deacons, but also work with some of the church members. And so financial life coaching is basically a platform in order to offer financial advice for those that need it most. So we're going to go through some stories today. I don't know, Ron, if you just want to flip to the third slide there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was flipping, but it's not. So
No,
I'm
it's
good.
not flipping on you. That's okay.
I have two screens, and on one screen it flipped, the other one it didn't. This is it, right? This one here?
This one, yeah. Here we are. Good, good.
Okay.
So I'm going to go through a few stories today with you. I think that stories are really important. They connect us, and we can learn a lot through other people's experiences. So the first story we're going to look at is a story of illness for Henry and Trudy, and how that illness pretty much turned their financial world upside down. And so before I get into that story, I want to go over some concepts with you. I'm just going to introduce them to you, and they're important in financial coaching. And so you should recognize this throughout the story that I go through. There is financial situation, financial assessment, financial story, and you don't know what you don't know. So we'll start with Henry and Trudy's story. And their financial situation is this, that Henry had a cancer diagnosis earlier on in the year, and he was no longer able to work, and that loss of income was causing them financial stress. They basically did not have enough income to cover their monthly expenses. And so I actually met with Henry and Trudy, and I did what I call a financial assessment, which is basically gathering information. Cash flow, net worth statement, those are helpful, but there's a lot of questions that I ask, a lot of things that we review. And here is what I learned after the financial assessment. Was Henry was 67 years old, and his wife, Trudy, was 64. He was not going to be able to work again. And Trudy herself hadn't worked for a lot of years because she had some physical challenges as well. Now, they owned their own townhouse. They had $15,000 in an RSP. And the good news is that they did have $575,000 in equity. They had a credit line for $90,000 and they had used up $85,000. So they were actually using the credit line to subsidize their shortfall every month. And so you could imagine how stressed they were becoming because there was not a lot of cash available anymore. So the cash flow itself showed that they were short $700 each and every month. And I asked them, as I ask all my clients throughout the years and anybody that I work with, I ask, what is important to you? And for them, it was really important that they had home security, that their house would be secure. So I'll just go to the next slide there for a second. All right, this is just puzzle pieces. I will explain. I want you to try to imagine, that you've got a really, really big puzzle and it's got a lot of pieces and you want all of the pieces in order to put them all together so that you can see the bigger picture. And that's really what a financial story is. It's making sure that you have all the puzzle pieces. And, for some of these pieces, it's pretty obvious, there's income, there's expenses, there's bad debt, there's credit cards, there's, equity. But there's other pieces to the puzzle that are really important too. Capacity is a really big part of somebody's financial story. Sometimes mental health, sometimes illness can be barriers for them to have a healthy financial story. In Henry's case, it was illness. And for them, home security was also another puzzle piece. They couldn't imagine selling their house and moving to another community when he was so ill. The extra stress was just overwhelming for them. This is all part of the financial story. And financial coaching is a lot about learning somebody's financial story and for the people themselves to understand their own financial story. So when I have all the information in front of me, when I can see the full story, sometimes we can see underlying problems and sometimes we can see some pretty straightforward solutions. And so with this information, we were able to come up with the plan. And this is what it looked like. There was a number of things. So first of all, cash flow. When I'm looking at expenses and income, for them, there was no way that they could lower their expenses. They were not overspenders, but they didn't have enough income. Henry basically was collecting his Canada pension, old age security, and that was all they had. So there's something called the Guaranteed Income Supplement, which is available for those that are 65 and older. And I think, I don't know, it's around $22,000 household income. If you have less than that, you get the Guaranteed Income Supplement, which works out to about $500 a month. So typically it works that for 99.9% of the people, it's based on your tax return, which shows your income. When you file your taxes, it'll show you your income from the prior year. If it's below 22,000, you qualify and you'll start collecting. But that wasn't going to work for Henry and Trudy because he had worked that year already. So he had income. But there's a way to get around that. If you call Service Canada and you get the right department and you ask the right questions, you can ask them to mail you an application, which is a financial hardship application because of reduced income throughout the middle of the year. Something like that, I'm not sure. So we filled up the application, and that would mean that Henry would qualify for that as of the date, like right away. So that additional income was going to be really important. It takes our wonderful government about 6 to 7 months to process an application like this. But once it's completed, it is retroactive. And so he would get a good lump sum, and then he'd have that additional income. I also recommended they cashed in their RSP immediately. The reason for this was if they cashed it a year or two later, it would affect that year's guaranteed income supplement payment. And then we talked about a reverse mortgage, and this is the direction they ended up going. In the 30 years plus of financial experience, I had never recommended a reverse mortgage, as there's usually better alternatives. There wasn't for them, and they understood the trade-offs that they were going to look at. So reverse mortgage, I won't get into the weeds on this one, but basically this is what they did. They are using the equity of their own house to borrow money, and they borrowed $100,000, paid off that credit line, and then they had $10,000 emergency fund set aside. And then they additionally drew another $700 a month income from their reverse mortgage so that they would have enough of a monthly income. The trade-offs are they're chipping away at their equity and the interest rates are higher, but it made sense for them. It was going to allow them to stay in their home. And so we'll just go to the next slide for a minute. We talk about rewriting the financial story or improving a financial story. So Henry and Trudy had been in a place where they were financially unstable, and now they had financial stability. They had an income that would cover their expenses, and they could stay in their home. And so that is their new financial story. So I'm going to go back to these concepts for a minute. Financial situation. This is what deacons are faced with most of the time. Somebody will come and say, you know, I can't pay my mortgage this month because I'm short of work. It's just a little glimpse of their financial story, but just a little piece. And so sometimes it's hard to really find out how to help them clearly. A financial assessment is it's a tool that I use, and it brings us from a financial situation to a financial story. So these we've all kind of gone through. I'm going to focus on you don't know what you don't know right now. So basically that concept is you cannot benefit from something if you do not know it exists. So in Henry and Trudy's case, without financial advice, they would have no idea that there was a government subsidy, that the guaranteed income supplement was there. They would not have known that a reverse mortgage was something that could give them home security, and they wouldn't have understood when and why to cash in their RSPs. So they wouldn't know these things because they don't know them. You can't benefit from something that you do not know exists. So it kind of takes us full circle to how I started, that financial advice is valuable for those who need it the most. And so that's Henry and Trudy's story. And I also am going to share another story. I worked on this as a case study in some of the workshops. And I put together this because there was a lot of common stories in the last 6 months, a lot of common concerns that people were having. And so I thought it was important to share this because it didn't end as neat and tidy as Henry and Trudy's story, because sometimes that happens. But anyway, we've got we've got a couple, Jody and George, and they had deacons that supported them on and off for a number of years with gift cards, even a new fridge at one point. And Jody worked full time. She worked 4 days a week, extended hours for 4 days a week. And George was a stay-at-home dad that was homeschooling their daughter. Now, it's interesting because they had declared bankruptcy many, many years back. And this is the third situation in the last 6 months where I was working with families that had declared bankruptcy already before. And so anyway, that's a little glimpse of their story. And so I did a financial assessment, and I just kind of listed a few of the red flags that came up throughout this assessment. Cash flow statement is just a real good eye opener because it shows already the underlying problem, which very often is their income is less than their expenses. So they were short $750 a month. That's just not sustainable. They spend $400 a month on takeout, and they spent $300 a month on internet and TV and cell phones and all of that related kind of things. They had $3,000 in unpaid bills. And so I'm talking hydro bills, cell phone bills, car repairs that they haven't been able to pay. And they had a second mortgage on their home. So I want to take a minute here to talk about that. Because it also has been very common this year to find people that have gone into some really bad debts that are 46%, I've seen 38%. And I wanted to explain the second mortgage they had on their house. So I kind of asked them, where did that come from? And I took a look at the statements on it. So 3 or 4 years prior to this, they had run into shortages. And, you know, they have equity in their house. As you can see, their net worth is $300,000. So that's good. But they went to, I believe they went to a mortgage broker, and he said, hey, you qualify for $90,000. They didn't need $90,000, but they qualified for $90,000. And so they took it. But what happened is they were only given 73,000. So if you can understand, they owe 90, but they were only paid out 73,000. That $27,000 was given to that mortgage company to cover risks or to cover fees or legal fees, but it was outrageous. And then they were making payments, interest payments only, but the interest was 12%. So they were paying $725 a month on this mortgage for 5 years, and in 5 years it would renew again, but they'd still owe $90,000. So I kind of would like to call this case study reality check because this was not sustainable. So it was a reality check for the couple to understand their story, but it is also a reality check for the deacons who were helping them, because it wouldn't matter how many gift cards they gave them or how often they helped them pay their bills. It was not sustainable. Something really needed to be done. I give out a full report. This is just a tiny glimpse to clients after I've finished working with them. If I get their permission, because this is all done in confidence, I can also share the reports with the deacons, which the deacons can find very helpful. So part of the report that I did for George and Jody was giving them their options. All right. Sometimes I like to work out options with the clients, and sometimes they just don't have the capacity to come up with different ideas. But regardless, they get a list at the end and I give them options. The first option is always to do nothing, because that is an option. They get to choose. But all of these options come with trade-offs. So I will go over the trade-offs with them. Do nothing to them would feel like a death by 1,000 stab wounds, if I guess that's what they say. You know, they would eventually go bankrupt. Before they went bankrupt, they'd have their hydro cut off, they'd have their cell phones cut off, they'd have nasty phone calls, and they'd have to sell their house like a fire sale because there was nothing else to do. So do nothing was an option, and then they'd understand what that would look like. The other option would be for them to sell their home at their own time, get the best out of it that they could. They could use the equity from that sale to pay off debt, but they'd also need some of that equity to subsidize rent because rent is not cheap. That would be an option for them. The trade-off for them here would be that they would be using all their equity up eventually. And if they had troubles already managing money, they could quite likely mismanage that equity and find themselves in big trouble again. So that was their other option. Their third option was to keep their house, but in order to do that, they'd need to increase their income by at least $1,200 a month. So that was worth a big discussion. So that was one of their options, but I also highly recommended that they would also work with an organization out of Ottawa. It's called More Than Enough. If anybody wants to look at their website, it's great. And they do budget and debt reduction coaching. And it's pretty intense and it's very, very helpful. So that was what I would recommend, number 3. So that's kind of what financial coaching looks like. That's a glimpse of it. In this situation, financial coaching was also important for George and Jody to understand their own financial story, because until they understand their own financial story, they can't understand the options they have or what their future financial story may look like. And so, yeah, that's what we went through with George and Jody. So I'm not sure how long we have for questions today. I am a financial coach with Diaconal Ministries, so I am here to support deacons and to support and go through financial coaching sessions with people within their church and church community if needed. But I'm going to, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to go over that with you, and I'm just going to give the floor back to Ron from here. So.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Anja. And this is the work that she does with us regularly. I would just reiterate the fact that sometimes we think that financial coaching and some of this kind of information is, really needed for the people who don't have homes or who are living in poverty. But it's more likely in our Christian Reformed churches that we're working with people like Anja just shared about. People actually maybe are in their homes who actually seem to have money. I mean, 300,000 equity looks like a lot of money, but are quietly in trouble and occasionally coming for a bit here and a bit there. And that is probably more likely in most of our churches. There are downtown churches, there are churches that are working with other levels of poverty. But so it's important to know that this help is available to you as deacons. And if you have a question, I would suggest at this point you could unmute yourself and just ask it. It would just take a couple of minutes. We'd like to be done by 1/2 the hour, whatever hour you're at. For me, it's 6:30. For most of you, it's probably almost 9:30. But if you have a question for Anja or for really any general question, there's one in the chat. Anja, is it hard for people to be honest with you and themselves?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, it is. I think it's a little less harder for them to be honest if they're working with a third party that they don't know very well. Sometimes it's hard for people to share all their financial secrets with somebody that they know. But I think words are really important. So sometimes it's how you frame it. And before I do a financial assessment or even initial phone call with people that I'm helping, I explain to them that it's important for us all to understand their financial story, and we have to gather a lot of information. And I affirm to them that it's hard to answer these questions, but it's really important. And then we work through the assessment together. So I don't know, it's sometimes hard for them to be honest, but there's also a lot of people that have a hard time gathering that information. And they also need some direction and maybe to do it together. So sometimes when deacons, this came up at the workshop that deacon said, we have a cash flow statement, but they're not filling it out. And sometimes it's a matter of capacity, not somebody being unwilling to, but it is hard for them to be honest if it's framed well and if the words are important as well when you're doing it. So
I think also we impress on them that Anja is a professional. This is confidentiality. That she does this or has done this for a living. So there's a level of expertise that they don't expect to encounter at this either, right? So when she introduces herself or we introduce her as a professional and then one who will hold confidences, and it's very important. Peter, you had a question. You have your hand up.
Your presentation on that one. Once you mentioned, you don't know what you don't know, and it's deeply we don't know that. My question is simply, how do you know that people are qualified for this?
I'm sorry,
Contact.
I caught part of that. So I think you were talking about if you don't know what you don't know, and then I missed the last part. It is a bit echoey, sorry.
So how do we know when to contact?
Oh, when to contact me? Yes. Well, pretty much if you're uncertain, you can just contact me right away. If you're helping somebody more than once, it's probably a situation where it wouldn't hurt for them to get a financial coaching sessions done. So often deacons will call me and we'll just have a conversation about a situation, and I'll let them know if they could refer me on or not. But usually a financial coaching session will help for anybody. The question really is, are they willing to do it? So that's sometimes where the barrier is.
We encourage the churches to have a clear benevolence policy as well, and that helps often. Then they can say things. They can say to somebody, hey, if we've helped you a few times and our policy says that if you won't fill out this assessment, then we can't help you anymore. Then they'll try, and if they can't, then we will refer you to Anja. The regional developers, Rachel and Mark, can help with this as well to a certain level. So you might want to talk to them first and say, oh, this is beyond our expertise. We're going to refer you to Anja. There are some basic things or, a lot of situations where we can help without her input, but when it gets past where they're, especially when they repeatedly ask month after month and you're kind of stuck, then we really want to involve her.
And it happens quite often that when I am contacted by deacons, it's either because they've been helping a lot or that the people that they've been working with have kind of hit rock bottom. So sometimes it's nice if we can connect with them earlier than that. But so yeah, if you're uncertain, you can always contact me and we can chat about it.